My name is Sarah Mitchell, and if you had told me 6 months ago that my life would take the turn it did, I would have laughed in your face. I was just another mid-level marketing coordinator at Henderson and Associates, a prestigious consulting firm in downtown Chicago. Every morning I'd grab my usual vanilla latte from the coffee shop on the corner, ride the elevator to the 14th floor, and settle into my cramped cubicle that overlooked the bustling streets below. My boss, Jonathan Reed, was everything you'd expect from a senior partner at a top-tier firm. Impeccably dressed, razor-sharp intellect, and a reputation for being absolutely ruthless when it came to business deals. At 42, he commanded respect from everyone in the office, including the other partners. He had this way of walking into a room that immediately shifted the energy. Conversations would pause, postures would straighten, and suddenly everyone was on their best behavior. I'd been working under his supervision for 3 years, and our relationship was strictly professional. He was demanding but fair, expecting nothing less than perfection from his team. I delivered consistently, often staying late to ensure every project met his impossibly high standards. It wasn't uncommon for me to be the last person in the office, fine-tuning presentations or analyzing market data until well past midnight. The company culture at Henderson and Associates was intense, to say the least. We were handling multi-million-dollar accounts and there was no room for error. The pressure was constant, but it was also exhilarating. Every successful campaign felt like a victory, and the bonuses reflected the high-stakes nature of our work. I was good at what I did, really good, and I could feel myself climbing the corporate ladder even if it was one careful step at a time. But there were whispers around the office. Rumors about internal politics, about certain deals that didn't quite add up, about meetings that happened behind closed doors. I tried to stay out of office gossip, focusing instead on my work and my growing portfolio of successful projects. Jonathan seemed to appreciate my dedication and discretion, often assigning me to his most confidential accounts. That Tuesday morning in March started like any other. The Chicago wind was particularly brutal, and I was grateful to escape into the warmth of our modern office building. I had just settled at my desk with my coffee when my computer chimed with a new email. It was from Jonathan's assistant, requesting my immediate presence in his corner office. My stomach dropped slightly. Unscheduled meetings with the boss were rarely good news. I gathered my notebook and pen, straightened my blazer, and made my way across the office floor. Jonathan's office was a testament to his success: floor-to-ceiling windows, expensive artwork, and a mahogany desk that probably cost more than my annual salary. He was standing with his back to me, looking out at the city skyline, his hands clasped behind his back. "You wanted to see me, Mr. Reed?" I said, closing the door behind me as his assistant had instructed. He turned around slowly and I noticed something different about his demeanor. The usual confident smile was replaced by something more serious, almost contemplative. "Sarah, please have a seat." He gestured to one of the leather chairs in front of his desk. "We need to talk." Those 4 words sent a chill down my spine. In my experience, "we need to talk" was never followed by good news. I sat down, trying to maintain my composure while my mind raced through every recent project, every email, every interaction we'd had. Had I made a mistake? Was I being let go? The silence stretched between us as he returned to his chair, studying me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "Sarah, I've been watching your work very closely over the past few months," he began, his voice lower than usual. "Your dedication, your attention to detail, your ability to handle sensitive information with discretion. You've impressed me more than you know." I felt a slight relief, but something in his tone suggested this conversation was far from over. "Thank you, sir. I really enjoy working on your accounts." He leaned forward, placing his elbows on the desk and steepling his fingers. "What I'm about to tell you stays between us. Completely confidential. Can I trust you with that?" I nodded, though my heart was now racing. "Of course." "Good. Because what I'm about to propose is going to change everything." Jonathan reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a thick manila folder, placing it carefully in front of me. The weight of the moment felt enormous, and I could hear my own heartbeat in the sudden silence of his office. Outside, the sounds of Chicago traffic seemed muted, as if the world had temporarily paused for whatever was about to unfold. "Before you open that," he said, his voice steady but carrying an undercurrent of something I couldn't quite identify, "I need you to understand the gravity of what I'm about to offer you. This isn't just about a promotion or a raise, Sarah. This is about fundamentally changing the trajectory of your entire career and potentially your life. My hands trembled slightly as I looked at the folder but didn't reach for it yet. I'm listening. He stood up and walked around his desk, perching on the edge so he was closer to me. This proximity felt unusual. Jonathan was always careful about maintaining professional boundaries and personal space. Henderson and Associates is expanding into international markets. We're opening a new division focused specifically on European acquisitions and mergers. It's a multi-billion-dollar venture that we've been planning in secret for over 2 years. The implications started to dawn on me. International expansion meant new opportunities, but it also meant massive changes and risks. That sounds incredibly exciting for the company, I managed to say. It is. But here's where it gets interesting for you. He paused and I could see him choosing his words carefully. I need someone I can trust absolutely to head up the preliminary research and client acquisition for this new division. Someone who understands our methods, our standards, and our commitment to excellence. Someone who can operate independently but also collaborate seamlessly with international partners. My mouth went dry. Are you offering me a position in this new division? I'm offering you the position to run this new division. As Vice President of European Operations. He let that sink in for a moment. Based in London with a salary that's triple what you're making now, plus equity in the new venture, plus a signing bonus that would allow you to buy that house you've been saving for, in cash. I felt dizzy. This was beyond anything I had ever imagined. VP level? Triple salary? Moving to London? Jonathan, I don't know what to say. This is incredible, but why me? There are people with more experience, more seniority. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. That's exactly why it has to be you. The senior partners here are too entrenched in our current systems, too set in their American business approaches. We need someone fresh, someone adaptable, someone who can think outside the box. But more than that, we need someone we can trust completely. That word, trust, seemed to carry extra weight the way he said it. What exactly would my responsibilities be? Initially, you'd be setting up our London office, establishing relationships with key European firms, and identifying acquisition targets. But Sarah, I need to be completely honest with you about something. He walked back to his side of the desk and sat down. This venture isn't just about expansion. It's about repositioning Henderson and Associates for some significant changes that are coming to the American market. What kind of changes? He was quiet for a long moment and I could see him weighing how much to tell me. There are some regulatory issues on the horizon. Nothing illegal, nothing unethical, but the business landscape is shifting. Having a strong European presence will provide us with flexibility in how we operate. Something in his tone made me uneasy, but the opportunity was so enormous that I pushed the feeling aside. When would this position start? I need an answer by Friday. If you accept, you'd relocate to London within 6 weeks. I know it's fast, but timing is crucial in this industry. He gestured to the folder again. Everything you need to know is in there. Salary details, job description, relocation package, even some preliminary information about the clients we'd be targeting. I finally reached for the folder, my hands no longer trembling. As I opened it, the first thing I saw was a salary figure that made my eyes widen. It was actually more than triple my current salary. It was enough to change my entire life. The job description was extensive and exciting, involving high-level strategy, international travel, and the kind of responsibility I had only dreamed about. This is life-changing, Jonathan. Thank you for thinking of me. Don't thank me yet, he said, and something in his voice made me look up from the papers. There's one more thing we need to discuss. The reason this opportunity exists and the reason it has to be someone like you. The room suddenly felt colder. What do you mean? He leaned back in his chair, studying my face carefully. Henderson and Associates has been very successful, but our success has attracted attention from some regulatory bodies. We need to be prepared for increased scrutiny of our domestic operations. Having key personnel and significant assets in European markets provides us with options should things become complicated here in the States. The euphoria I had been feeling started to ebb, replaced by a growing sense of unease. Are we in legal trouble? No, absolutely not. But in today's business climate, it's prudent to be prepared for various scenarios. What I'm offering you is a chance to be part of the solution, to help secure the company's future while advancing your own career exponentially. I looked down at the papers again, but now the number seemed less exciting and more like a bribe. Jonathan, I need to ask you directly. Is there something about Henderson and Associates that I should know? Something that would make me want to distance myself from the company? His expression hardened slightly. Sarah, I've worked with you for 3 years. You're smart, capable, and discreet. I'm offering you the opportunity of a lifetime because I believe you can handle the complexities of international business. But if you're not interested, I understand. There are other candidates. The implicit threat was clear. Take the offer or potentially find yourself on the outside of whatever was coming. But as I sat there looking at this incredible opportunity, I realized that my answer would determine not just my career path, but potentially my entire future. That night, I sat in my small apartment staring at the folder Jonathan had given me, unable to shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The offer was too good, too sudden, and his explanations about regulatory issues and increased scrutiny felt deliberately vague. I poured myself a glass of wine and decided to do what I did best: research. I started with basic searches about Henderson and Associates' recent activities, regulatory filings, and news mentions. Most of what I found was standard business press: successful deals, new client acquisitions, industry awards. But as I dug deeper, using my access to premium business databases through the company, I started finding more concerning information. There were several mentions of Henderson and Associates in connection with offshore shell companies, complex financial structures that seemed designed more for tax avoidance than legitimate business purposes. One article from a financial crimes publication mentioned the firm in passing as part of a broader investigation into money laundering schemes, though no charges had been filed. My stomach dropped as I found a series of encrypted emails in our internal system that I probably shouldn't have had access to. My security clearance was high due to my work on confidential accounts, but these messages seemed to be from a restricted server. The emails were between Jonathan and several other senior partners, discussing something called Operation Clean Slate. The messages were cryptic, but the pattern was clear. They were discussing moving significant assets offshore, restructuring client accounts to minimize paper trails, and preparing for what they called regulatory intensification. One email from Jonathan particularly caught my attention. Sarah Mitchell has proven herself trustworthy and discreet. She would be ideal for the London position. Her loyalty to the firm and lack of family ties make her a perfect candidate for permanent relocation. The phrase "lack of family ties" hit me like a physical blow. It was true. I was single, my parents had passed away in a car accident 5 years ago, and I had no siblings. But the way it was written made it sound like they had selected me specifically because I would be easy to isolate. I spent the next 2 days discreetly investigating further, using my legitimate work activities as cover. I discovered that Henderson and Associates had been under investigation by the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network for the past 18 months. The investigation centered around suspicious transaction reports involving several high-profile clients and potential violations of anti-money laundering regulations. More disturbing was what I learned about the European expansion. The London office wasn't a new venture. It was a front operation designed to obscure the movement of funds and provide plausible deniability for senior partners if criminal charges were filed. The clients we would supposedly be targeting were actually existing Henderson clients who needed to move their assets offshore quickly. Thursday evening, I made a decision that would change everything. I contacted my former college roommate, Jessica, who now worked as an investigative journalist for the Chicago Tribune. We met at a small cafe far from downtown, away from any potential Henderson and Associates colleagues. "Jess, I need advice, and I need you to promise me this stays between us until I figure out what to do." She could see the seriousness in my face. "Of course. What's going on?" I told her everything: the job offer, my research findings, the suspicious emails, the investigation. As I spoke, I watched her expression change from excitement about my opportunity to concern to something approaching alarm. "Sarah, you need to understand what you're describing. This isn't just corporate misconduct. This sounds like a criminal enterprise. If you take this job, you could become complicit in money laundering operations. But if I don't take it, they'll know I'm suspicious." Jonathan made it clear that there are other candidates, but the way he said it felt like a threat. Jessica was quiet for a moment, thinking. "You have a couple of options. You could go to the FBI with what you found. You could decline the offer and look for work elsewhere. Or, she paused. Or what? You could take the job and work with law enforcement to gather evidence from the inside. But Sarah, that would be incredibly dangerous. These people have a lot to lose. That night, I lay awake weighing my options. Each path seemed fraught with risks. If I went to the FBI now, I might not have enough evidence to make a compelling case, and I would definitely lose my job and career. If I declined the offer and stayed at Henderson, I would be working for a company under criminal investigation, potentially watching from the sidelines as my colleagues were arrested. But the third option, taking the job and working undercover, terrified me. I wasn't trained for that kind of work, and if I were discovered, the consequences could be severe. Friday morning arrived faster than I wanted. I had to give Jonathan my answer, but I still wasn't sure what that answer would be. I arrived at the office early, hoping to have more time to think, but I found a message waiting for me to come to his office immediately. When I walked in, Jonathan wasn't alone. 2 other senior partners were there. Michael Henderson, the firm's founder, and Patricia Walsh, head of our financial crimes compliance department. The presence of Patricia particularly unsettled me, given what I had discovered about the ongoing investigation. "Sarah," Jonathan said, his voice warm but his eyes watchful. "I hope you've had time to consider our offer. Michael and Patricia wanted to meet with you personally to emphasize how important this opportunity is for both you and the firm." Michael Henderson was in his 70s, a legend in the consulting world, but up close he looked tired and stressed. "Ms. Mitchell, Jonathan speaks very highly of your work. We believe you're exactly what we need for our European operations." Patricia Walsh was studying me with the intense gaze of someone trained to detect deception. "We understand this is a big decision, Sarah. Moving to another country, taking on such significant responsibilities. But we want you to know that we have complete confidence in your abilities and your discretion." That word again, discretion. I realized this meeting wasn't just about getting my answer. It was about assessing my loyalty and determining if I posed a threat. "I'm very grateful for the opportunity," I said carefully. "It's certainly an exciting prospect." "That sounds like someone who's made up their mind," Jonathan said with a smile that didn't warm his eyes. I took a deep breath, knowing that my next words would determine not just my immediate future, but potentially the rest of my life. "I accept the position." The relief in the room was palpable, but as I shook hands with each of them, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just signed something far more significant than an employment contract. The next 6 weeks passed in a blur of preparation, paperwork, and increasingly uncomfortable discoveries. My official title was Vice President of European Operations, but my real education was in the intricate web of financial manipulation that Henderson and Associates had constructed over decades. As part of my preparation for the London position, I was given access to files and systems that revealed the true scope of what I was becoming involved in. Henderson and Associates wasn't just bending rules. They were at the center of a sophisticated money laundering operation that involved dozens of shell companies, fraudulent transactions, and clients who were themselves under investigation for everything from tax evasion to organized crime. I maintained regular contact with Jessica, meeting her for coffee or lunch whenever possible, sharing what I was learning. She had quietly begun her own investigation, using her journalistic resources to verify and expand on the information I was providing. "Sarah, this is bigger than we thought," she told me during one of our meetings. "I've traced some of these shell companies and they're connected to international crime syndicates. You're not just looking at white-collar crime. This is serious organized criminal activity." Meanwhile, at work, I was being treated like their golden child. Jonathan had arranged for me to have a corner office during my transition period, and I was invited to meetings and briefings that were clearly above my supposed pay grade. But I began to realize that this special treatment wasn't about my value as an employee. It was about their need to ensure my loyalty and complicity. 3 weeks before my departure date, I had a meeting with Patricia Walsh that changed everything. She called me into her office under the pretense of reviewing compliance procedures for international operations. "Sarah, I want to talk to you about something important," she began, closing the door behind me. "I know you're intelligent and observant. I'm sure you've noticed some irregularities in how we handle certain client accounts." I tried to keep my expression neutral. "I'm not sure what you mean." She smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "Let me be more direct. Henderson and Associates provides specialized financial services to clients who require discretion and flexibility. Some of these services exist in regulatory gray areas. As someone who will be representing the firm internationally, you need to understand the full scope of what that means. She opened a file on her desk and turned it toward me. Inside were detailed records of transactions that were clearly money laundering operations, millions of dollars being moved through multiple accounts and jurisdictions to obscure their origins. These clients pay us very well for our services, she continued. They also expect absolute loyalty and discretion from everyone in the organization. People who demonstrate that loyalty are rewarded accordingly. People who don't. She let the sentence hang in the air. I stared at the documents, realizing that this wasn't just about showing me the true nature of the business. It was about making me complicit. By showing me these records and allowing me to see classified information, they were ensuring that I couldn't expose them without exposing myself. Patricia, I appreciate your confidence in me, but I'm not sure I'm comfortable with this level of flexibility in our operations. Her expression hardened immediately. Sarah, you've already accepted the position. You've signed confidentiality agreements. You've been given access to privileged information. There's no backing out now. That night, I called Jessica from a secure phone I had purchased with cash. Jess, I think I'm in over my head. They're not just showing me evidence of their crimes. They're making me complicit. I think they plan to use my involvement to ensure my silence. Sarah, you need to get out. No. Before you leave for London. I can't. They've made it clear that's not an option. But I have an idea. What if we use this to our advantage? What if I take detailed records of everything I'm being shown and provide them to law enforcement? That's extremely dangerous. If they suspect you're gathering evidence. I know. But I think I might be the only person positioned to get the kind of comprehensive evidence needed to bring down the entire operation. We spent the next hour developing a plan. Jessica would serve as my contact with law enforcement, while I would document everything I could access before leaving for London. Once there, I would continue gathering evidence while maintaining my cover as a loyal employee. The plan was risky, but it felt like the only option that might lead to justice rather than just my own escape. My last week in Chicago was surreal. I attended farewell parties, received gifts from colleagues who had no idea they were working for a criminal organization, and maintained the facade of excited anticipation about my new position. But every night I was photographing documents, copying files, and building a comprehensive case against Henderson and Associates. Jonathan took me to dinner the night before my departure. An expensive restaurant downtown where we had champagne and he toasted my future success. As I looked across the table at him, I realized how completely I had misjudged him. The professional, demanding boss I had respected was actually a sophisticated criminal who had manipulated me into becoming his accomplice. Sarah, I want you to know how much this means to me personally, he said, raising his glass. Having someone I can trust completely in London will allow me to sleep better at night. I won't let you down, I replied, the irony of my words not lost on me. I know you won't. Because you understand what's at stake now. For all of us. As I boarded the plane to London the next morning, I carried with me 2 sets of luggage, one containing my personal belongings and professional materials, and another containing encrypted drives with enough evidence to potentially bring down one of Chicago's most respected consulting firms. But as the plane lifted off, I couldn't shake the feeling that Jonathan's final words had been less of a statement of confidence and more of a warning about what would happen if I betrayed that trust. London was everything I had imagined and nothing like I had expected. The Henderson and Associates European office was a gleaming space in Canary Wharf, with stunning views of the Thames and all the technological resources I could need. But what surprised me most was how legitimate the operation appeared to be. For the first month, I genuinely wondered if I had misunderstood the situation in Chicago. The London office was handling real international consulting projects, working with established European companies, and operating with apparent transparency. I began to think that perhaps the criminal activities were limited to specific divisions back in the States. That illusion was shattered when I met our primary client contact, a man named Viktor Kozlov who claimed to represent a consortium of Eastern European investors. Our first meeting was in a private dining room at an exclusive London club, and within minutes it became clear that Mr. Kozlov was not a legitimate businessman. Miss Mitchell, Jonathan Reed speaks very highly of your discretion and capabilities, he said in accented English. We have significant capital that requires creative management strategies. The projects he described were textbook money laundering schemes, complex investment structures designed to move large sums of money through multiple jurisdictions while obscuring their origins. The amounts involved were staggering, hundreds of millions of dollars that clearly came from illegal sources. I maintained my professional demeanor while internally reeling from the realization that the London office wasn't separate from the criminal activities. It was central to them. I was being positioned as the public face of Henderson's European operations while they used the office to launder money for international crime syndicates. That evening, I contacted Jessica using encrypted communication methods we had established. It's worse than we thought. The London office is the hub of their money laundering operations. I'm not just documenting evidence. I'm actively participating in financial crimes. Sarah, you need to contact law enforcement immediately. The FBI has been working with international agencies on this case. There's something else. I think they're planning something bigger. Kozlov mentioned preparing for significant transitions in their business model. I think they might be planning to shut down the Chicago operations and move everything overseas. Over the next several weeks, I walked a dangerous tightrope. During the day, I performed my duties as VP of European Operations, facilitating meetings and processing paperwork for what I now knew were criminal transactions. At night, I documented everything, building an extensive case file that included names, amounts, account numbers, and detailed descriptions of the money laundering schemes. But as I gathered more evidence, I also became aware that I was being watched. Kozlov's associates seemed to always be around, and I noticed the same faces in coffee shops and on the street near my apartment. The pressure was enormous and I began to fear that my cover was blown. 3 months into my London assignment, Jonathan arrived for what he called a routine check-in. We met at my office after hours and immediately I could tell something was different about his demeanor. Sarah, I want to thank you for the excellent work you've been doing here. Kozlov and his associates are very pleased with our partnership. I'm glad to hear that. The projects have been educational. He smiled, but his eyes were cold. I'm sure they have been. You've learned a lot about our business model, about our clients, about our methods. Something in his tone made my blood run cold. Yes, it's been a valuable experience. Sarah, I need to ask you a direct question and I need you to answer me honestly. Have you been in contact with anyone about Henderson and Associates business? Anyone outside the organization? My heart was racing, but I forced myself to remain calm. Of course not. I understand the confidentiality requirements. He studied my face for a long moment. Good. Because we've had some concerns. Some of our Chicago operations have been compromised. We believe someone has been providing information to law enforcement. The room felt like it was spinning. They knew there was a leak even if they didn't know it was me. That's terrible. Do you know who? We have our suspicions. But that's why I'm here, Sarah. We're accelerating our timeline for transferring operations to Europe. Within the next month, most of our key personnel will be relocating to London permanently. That's a major change. It is. And it means your role is becoming even more critical. You'll be helping to coordinate the transition of some very sensitive client relationships. He paused. Sarah, I need to know that I can count on your absolute loyalty during this transition. Of course you can. But as he left my office that night, I realized that my time was running out. If Henderson and Associates was moving their entire operation to London, they would be beyond the reach of American law enforcement. And if they suspected a leak, it was only a matter of time before they identified me as the source. I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of waiting to gather more evidence, I would contact the authorities immediately and provide everything I had collected. But as I prepared to make that call, I discovered something that made me reconsider everything I thought I knew about the situation. Hidden in a secure folder on my office computer was a series of emails between Jonathan and various law enforcement agencies. As I read through them, the truth became clear. Jonathan Reed wasn't just a criminal. He was an undercover federal agent who had been building a case against Henderson and Associates for over 5 years. The European expansion, my recruitment, even Kozlov and his associates, everything had been part of an elaborate sting operation designed to identify and prosecute an international money laundering network. I wasn't a reluctant whistleblower or an unwitting accomplice. I was working for one of the good guys and I had never known it. The next morning, Jonathan called me into a secure conference room where I met Special Agent Maria Santos from the FBI and Detective Inspector James Crawford from the Metropolitan Police Service. "Sarah," Jonathan said, his voice warmer than I had heard it in months, "it's time you learned the truth about what we've really been doing here." As they explained the operation, I realized that my moral struggles, my fears about complicity, and my efforts to gather evidence had all been unnecessary. I had been recruited not because I was expendable or easily manipulated, but because my genuine reactions and ethical concerns made me the perfect unwitting asset in their investigation. "We needed someone whose responses would be authentic," Agent Santos explained. "Someone who would react to the evidence of criminal activity exactly the way an innocent person would react. Your documentation efforts and your contact with Jessica Chen actually helped confirm several aspects of our case." "You knew about Jessica?" Jonathan smiled. "Sarah, we've been monitoring every aspect of this operation. Jessica's investigation complemented our work perfectly. In fact, her articles will be part of the public revelation when we make arrests next week." I felt a mix of relief, embarrassment, and anger. So everything I went through, the moral struggles, the fear, the stress, that was all unnecessary? "Not unnecessary," Detective Inspector Crawford said. "Your genuine reactions helped establish the credibility of our operation. Kozlov and the real criminals we were targeting believed our setup because you believed it." 2 weeks later, I watched from a secure location as coordinated raids took place simultaneously in Chicago, London, and 6 other cities. The investigation led to the arrest of 43 individuals, including several high-ranking members of international crime syndicates, and the seizure of over $800 million in assets. Henderson and Associates, it turned out, was a legitimate consulting firm that had been infiltrated and gradually taken over by criminal elements. The Real Michael Henderson and Patricia Walsh had been cooperating with law enforcement for years, helping to build the case against the criminals who had corrupted their company. As for me, I was offered a position with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, a chance to use my skills and experience to fight the kind of corruption I had inadvertently helped expose. Jonathan, whose real name was Agent Robert Coleman, would be my supervisor. "So what do you say, Sarah?" he asked as we stood in the London office one last time before returning to the States. "Ready for a career change that's actually unexpected?" I looked out at the Thames thinking about everything that had led to this moment. The fear, the uncertainty, the moral complexity of trying to do the right thing when you're not sure what the right thing is. "You know what?" I said, turning back to him with a smile. "I think I'm ready for whatever comes next. But next time, maybe let me in on the plan from the beginning." He laughed. "Sarah, in this business sometimes the best plans are the ones where not everyone knows they're part of the plan." As we walked out of the office together, I realized that sometimes the most unexpected proposals lead to exactly where you're supposed to be.